So I'm Dr. Carol Tyson. I'm the Associate Dean for Admissions here, and delighted to see everybody. Thank you for coming. I know some of you are people who've applied before and didn't get in, and some of you are people who've not applied yet. And we hope that you'll all find this helpful and successful for you. We've set up these 3 sessions to try to deal with this process in a couple different ways. So tonight is more of an overview of the application, and then with some specifics about the academic part and the letters of recommendation part. So really what we want to get at in this whole process for you is that you want to be a doctor for the right reasons, that it's the right decision for you, and that's essentially what we're trying to find out in the process of reviewing your application and interviewing you. So again, we're going to talk about experiences very, very briefly, personal statement very briefly, and then we'll spend most of tonight academics and letters of recommendation. So the first point that I want to make is you need to make it easy for people who are screening your applications to find the information. That sounds pretty basic, but we have 18 people who are screening 4,500 applications and trying to get that done early enough so that we can schedule people for interviews. So what this means is that if you, for instance, let's just take shadowing. If you have done shadowing, but you don't list it in your experiences, and it doesn't show up in your personal statement, the chances of that screener finding it are markedly reduced, and you're not going to get an interview. Sometimes it turns up in the letter of recommendation, but not all the screeners are going to keep looking and looking and looking if they don't find it in the 2 obvious places. So really it belongs in your experience section. That's just an example. So just think about what you're trying to tell us about who you are and how easy is it for us to find that information if we're very quickly going through the application. The more thorough review of your application comes later when you've already been accepted for an interview. The other thing that's always worth remembering is anything you put on the application is fair game to be asked during an interview. So if there's something in your history that you would prefer we didn't know about, don't put it on anywhere in your application. Sometimes you have to put something in there as an explanation for instance, low MCAT or a DUI that you have to declare. We ask that you declare those sorts of things. And yes, you definitely need to tell us about those kind of things. But if you were found running naked across the quadrangle at midnight, but there was no institutional action taken, we don't need to know about that. Okay? And then also your secondary application, it's a separate part, is another place. There's an autobiography piece. It's another place for you to give us more information if you want to that's not in the personal statement. So quickly on experiences, people always are asking what they should do and why we spend so much time looking at this. And basically, the reason that we want you to do this is the more experience you get in anything, basically, the more mature you are, the more you understand other people. And being a physician is all about understanding other people and trying to relate to them on their level, whatever that means, and getting a feel for where their medical problem is in the context of their life. And so the more exposure you have to other people, the better you're going to be at that. You should never choose an experience just to get in. So that's another really common question. Is it better for me to work in an ER, or is it better for me to spend all my time in a family practice office or whatever? You could just as easily be working in a restaurant. Yes, we definitely want you to get medical exposure, and we'll talk about that next time. But the main point is that you do something that appeals to you. You should be getting experience that you want for whatever reason you want it. And you should learn something from that experience. And what you're trying to tell us is what you learned from that experience. That's what we're looking for. So I would encourage you, as you do different things in your lives, to journal. Think about journaling. Just write down, even if it's one line at the end of a given day or every couple days or once a week, what you did that week, what you learned from it, what you got out of it, what you wish you'd gotten out of it, and that sort of thing. And that ultimately that's going to help you grow yourself. The other point that we'll make over and over is that when you fill out those boxes on your MCAT application, you really want to fill them out in a reflective way rather than a descriptive way. We have no idea what you learned at all if you tell us that you folded towels and got drinks of water for people, or you washed dishes, or whatever it was you did. It will help us a great deal if we know more about what you learned from whatever it was you did. So reflect on it, don't just describe it. And again, the personal statement, what we're looking for there is what motivates you toward a career in medicine, why you think you're interested in it, how you think you're suited for it, and again, putting that all together and making us believe and understand that you've made the right choice. So this is a key chart, and I want you to spend time looking at it on the website, because a lot of you have asked questions specific to, if my GPA is this, do I even stand a chance? Or if my MCAT is this, do I even stand a chance? So you're looking at the number of people that were accepted in a given category and the total number who applied in that category. And this is your mean MCAT. So this would be an MCAT of about 30 to 33. And here's the GPA range. And this is your undergrad GPA. So for those of you that you're looking at this and say, how did you ever take someone, let's say down here, we took one person with an undergrad GPA that wasn't even a 3-point. And the reason that happens is that person, no doubt, went to grad school and got a 4-point in grad school. So they come back and rescue that previous GPA, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But for each of you as individuals, if you would look at your own situation and take a good look at this chart, you will have a good answer to your own question about what your odds are. And you can see that the vast majority of people are in this area right here. And yes, there are a few here, but not so many. So if you're in this area, you're in a 1 to 6 chance of getting in. And as you get more toward the central area in here, you're more like a 1 in 3, 1 in 4. So just this is, we created this specifically to try to help you answer this question for yourself. And we're not telling you should never try, but we're telling you that it may be a long shot if you're over on the left side of that chart somewhere. Pat's reminding me that these numbers, this is from this past year, and these are completed applications. So this doesn't represent people who started to apply but never sent us their letters, kind of dropped out halfway in the process. These are completed. So here are our mean scores. The mean GPA is about a 3.6, but you just saw from that chart that there are people all over the place. And the mean MCAT is about 10.45, and again, there are people all over the place. The verbal score is really important to us, and many of you have asked questions about, is it more important that I do well in physics or that I do well in biology? And I will tell you that it's more important that you do well on the verbal reasoning. It's not going to save you if your biology and physics are 4s and your verbal reasoning is a 15. That's not going to work. But on the other hand, if you had an MCAT of, let's say, 27, which becomes slightly borderline, 27 we start sort of paying attention more. If that 27 has a verbal score of 10 and a biology of 9 and a physics of 8, did I do my math right? That would probably be okay. On the other hand, if the verbal reasoning is 4, and the other two are more like 12 and I need to get to 23. 12 and 11, that's not likely to get you in. We put a lot of store in the verbal reasoning because it has to do with your reasoning ability. It's not just about your verbal ability. So the verbal score is really important. The writing sample, again, gives us some idea of how you communicate in writing. So what do we do with people whose GPA in college is less than 3.5? These are the things we think about when we look at this. So we don't automatically go, no, goodbye. We look at the application, even in the screening process. We're looking to see if we think for some reason there might have been inadequate preparation in high school. And the only way we can tell that is if you tell us that somewhere. If it took time to adjust to college and you were just fooling around partying the first 2 years, in some way you might want to tell us that, but you might also want to tell us how you then became much more responsible thereafter. If there was some bump in the road for personal reasons, something happened in your family, something happened to you, to a loved one, and it really affected your ability to study, tell us that. And again, these things can go in your personal statement. They can go in your secondary. The 2 places you have an opportunity to do this. Finally, we want to see your grades going up. So it's almost better, I'm not encouraging you, but hopefully you're all in college already, it's almost better to start a little lower and get a little better than the other way around. So when you get a 4-point as a freshman, there's almost no place to go but down, unless you can stay there. So again, the bottom line is, if your grades are lower than this, you need to give us some compelling reason for that. And then you also may need to redeem yourself. So how do you redeem yourself, which is the common question? One is that you take some graduate level courses and do well in them, and science courses, and show us that you can do science at a graduate level and do reasonably well at it. You don't necessarily have to take a whole master's degree program. You don't necessarily have to take a whole baccalaureate program. The other question around this is, what about community college versus a university? It really doesn't matter, but it's contextual. And what I mean by that is, if somebody gets a 4-point in a community college and somebody else gets a 4-point in a university, they're not totally equally weighted. Honestly, we don't have a formula for that, but we're looking at what was the rigor in that particular program. So similarly, we would look at how well do you do when you're taking 5 science courses at a time versus taking 1 and then a lot of non-science courses. And that should hopefully make sense to you all. When you get to medical school, you're going to be taking 4 and 5 science courses simultaneously, and that's what makes it seem more difficult. It's actually not technically that each course is not all that more difficult. It's just that you're taking 5 of them at the same time. So any way that you can show us that you can do that is to your advantage. If you've been out of school for more than 5 years, we often just want to know if you can stand to sit in a classroom anymore. And you still remember how to do science. You may not have had science for 8 years, 9 years. So that's another situation in which it's sometimes helpful to just go take a course in grad school or, again, at a community college. And then there are, of course, the formal post-bac programs, and there isn't one here, unfortunately, so there are some other places in the country if you want to do that. To the MCAT. So, again, the verbal reasoning is critical. We already mentioned that. And when we see a verbal reasoning below 7, we get pretty worried. And it's hard for you to redeem yourself from a verbal reasoning score below 7. And the reason for that is that we see people having difficulty passing their licensure exams during medical school. And we don't want to admit you to have you fail. We want to admit you to be successful. Most people, once they're in here, they get out of here with a degree. So we want to make sure that when you get in, that we think you can pass those tests. So if we see an average MCAT less than 9, here are some of the things we look for in the application. Was the MCAT taken before you had physics, biology, chemistry, etc.? We might expect a lower score there. Again, have you been out of school for a long time before you took your MCAT and you can't remember your sciences so well? Did you take a prep course? Definitely people who take prep courses tend to score higher on MCAT than people who don't. But we also realize that not everybody can afford to take a prep course, nor might they have the time to take a prep course. Either of those 2 things or something else I haven't thought of is an issue for you. Make that known in your application. It's perfectly okay to say, I was working full-time, I need to support my family, I can't afford to take a prep course. Let us know that. We will tend to be a little easier on you if we see that, because we know that people who take prep courses tend to score a couple points higher in almost every category. Some of you will have had problems with standardized tests. You may not have done so well on your SATs or your ACTs, and that also influences what happens. And if that's the case, or if you have test anxiety or something like that, I would encourage you, if you're an undergrad still, to go to the learning specialist in your undergrad institution. There is somebody here at the U that does that. I don't know exactly who that is. I would suggest you go through the Career Counseling Center through Heather Kleinschmidt's office to find out who that is exactly. If you're out of school, it gets a little trickier, and I don't have a good resource for that, but perhaps the learning specialist who helps the undergrads could advise you as who there might be in the community for those of you who've been out of school and think you might want to get some help in this regard. So if we see a low MCAT, and you've had a low MCAT and you want to come back and fix that, one way to do that, if the scores were low in the sciences, again, would be to do more coursework in the sciences and see if you can get yourself a better understanding of them and take it again. There are MCAT practice tests online that are free, and then there are a lot of commercial prep courses. I'm not here to advertise for any particular company, but I do want you to know that some of the companies have scholarships for the MCAT. Some have loans for the MCAT, and they look at your financial aid application, your FAFSA, which some of you are not familiar with yet, but when you get close, you'll be applying for financial aid, or you have financial aid as an undergrad, let them know that. Some of the companies have military discounts. The other thing to realize is that some of the companies provide a free test to the pre-med advisors at their national meeting, and so they may have one in their pocket that they're waiting to dole out. There are also about 50 different organizations, at least on this campus, undergrad, that have to do with pre-health or pre-med, and they sometimes get a couple of free prep courses that they auction off at some of their events. So it's really worth staying in touch with these pre-med groups or pre-health groups and getting on their mailing list and find out what's going on. So going to letters, it's really important that you ask the right person for a letter of recommendation. Many of you will get a letter from a pre-med committee, and that's fine. If not, we need 3 letters from faculty that have taught you. They don't necessarily have to be science faculty. We're looking for a lot of different things, which will come up on the next slide. But you need to ask the right person. If you ask somebody for a letter of recommendation and they kind of, yeah, okay, you may want to retract your request. That person's probably not going to write a very enthusiastic letter for you. You should think about getting letters at the time when you're, let's say, in a work setting and you're no longer going to be in that work setting, and that person would probably, your supervisor, write you a good letter. It's a good time to get the letter. And they want to send it anonymously. Again, if you're an undergrad, they can send it to the counseling center to hold for you. If you're not in school, there is a site, Interfolio. It's something like www.interfolio.com. But we're going to have it posted on our website. So they can hold letters for you if somebody wants to send a letter that you don't see and you want it to be stored for you somewhere. It's also perfectly okay to direct the letter writer to say, I need a letter of recommendation that talks about my ability to get along with other people, or I need a letter that talks about my work ethic, or I need a letter about my academic skill. And it's perfectly okay to get those from different people and to direct the letter writer. So the people who write your letters should know you really well, and they should know you in one or more of these areas. And so again, most of your teachers, especially if it's in a big class, won't be able to say much about most of these factors. They might be able to talk about you're getting a 3.9 in their class, but we can kind of tell that from looking at your transcript. So that doesn't tell us a lot. So basically, these are the items you want to have covered in a letter, one or more letters. And then again, Wednesday night, so that's the end of the prepared stuff. Wednesday night, we're going to talk about experiences and shadowing and writing your personal statement. And then next week, we're going to specifically talk about the interview.